So hello everybody, I'm Sanjivana. So here we are back again for a wonderful another episode of No Visible Bruises. And today we have our wonderful guest and host of actually, and our specialist in this field, Caroline Harlibel. So she is going to explain about uh, special thing she did to help a client, and we have some questions that is coming along. Like we did, like first she taught us about like different types of abuse and how cohesive control and isolation affects mental and emotional health. So there are a few questions from that still left. So let's try to ask for these questions also. So uh,
Yeah,
we would
let's
like
definitely do
to welcome you, Caroline. She's a brain spotting practitioner, somatic trauma informant, uh, a positive psychology coach. So we are so grateful to have you here, and we welcome you with utmost respect, Caroline. So
Thank you.
how are you today? And
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, it's a pleasure to come back again together with you again, Sanjivana, just to have this conversation, this opportunity to speak about trauma and domestic abuse and violence. And as you say, today we're going to be touching on the subject a little bit, hopefully, of suicidal ideation as well. So again, just bringing that caveat into the beginning of this conversation, if any of these topics today should find more distressing for you, again, reaching out to your local community support centres, or if anything, your local first aid practitioners. Ultimately we want to be able to inform you here today, so that we can keep you safe and hopefully help you in the future. So yeah, so let's jump into those last few questions
uh,
that we had from
uh,
before.
and sorry, yeah, is it possible? Like you said, you helped a person recently, or would you, after the questions, would you like to do it, or before that? How is it suitable?
Let's finish off those last few questions that we
Okay,
had,
okay, okay,
as you
okay.
say. That feels like more continuation of the
Continue.
journey
Okay,
for
okay.
our followers.
Uh-huh. So, okay, there was a range of questions and you answered them beautifully. And we have posted these things also, so anybody can look into those. So
Yeah.
there was another question, and she was teaching us different parts. So these were questions that were gathered uh, according to that session. So there was like about apologies. So how to know these apologies, like which are right and which are abusive? We were
Mm,
talking about
yeah.
apologies also, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like ultimately, when you're dealing with a person that potentially is abusive and manipulative, like there's a lot of variety of different kind of apologies. I know that we spoke about the nice one as a behavioral abusive behavioral pattern, sort of
Mhm.
like giving you expensive gifts in order to apologize for things. So, and we call that term uh cherry bombing, and so ultimately, you'll get lavish gifts to
Mhm.
be as an apology, but
Uh-huh.
it also creates a beholden, and then those gifts can be taken away from you as well to create emotional pain and an instability in that. So it depends. Like a gift, if ultimately, yes, sometimes gifts are given as an apology, but
Mhm.
if the gift is given and then there is a condition with it, then
Mhm.
it's an abusive element. And ultimately everybody is free to refuse a gift. You don't have to receive a gift from somebody,
Mhm.
like, so there's the so in your own autonomy, if you feel like the gift is being given with an agenda per se, then just giving yourself the opportunity to be aware of that potentially. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So how would a person really exactly know whether this is genuine, or like is it the abuse you say, uh, or somebody could apologize and try to fix things even if something bad happened, right? So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
would try to
I mean,
fix.
as you say, ultimately, we can never really know 100% sort of going into receiving a gift as to whether or not it feels comfortable to receive that. But if there's an expectation with the gift or something, like I gave you this ring and now
Okay.
I expect other things from you, there's that element of, well, that's an abusive gift. They've tried to create leverage over you in order to make you do something. So it's a power move rather than a gift given freely to empower you. So yeah, so there's that element. If it's like, if you notice the language of, well, I gave you this, it's that coerciveness. It's like, I expect something from you because I gave you that. That's where that coerciveness comes in. Yeah.
So,
So
many questions come to my mind there. So then,
yeah.
what if like the person is ungrateful, and then the other partner, somebody says like, if okay, there's an argument or something, no, and they said you
Mm.
have done nothing to me, no, and then the other person says like, why I did these things for you, no, but they might take the one was who was telling that didn't do anything, and starting something. Sometimes this person can feel like this is some abusive treatment or something, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I appreciate the context of, also there is the other side of the balance of, if you don't give me this, I won't give you that. That
Oh.
negotiation, again, that's an abuse as well. It's like,
Uh-huh.
I need to have this top, otherwise I'm going to be really, huffy with you. I'm not going to be cooperative. I'm not going to do washing up, because they feel like they deserve to be rewarded for mediocrity and low standard things. But as you say, about when you start looking into the nature of gift giving, which has that abusive mentality around it in order to manipulate somebody,
Mhm.
that's where you need to see that nuance in it.
Mhm.
So yeah. And ultimately as well, if somebody's bringing up past gifts, it's again, it's an undermining of your relationship of right now if they're bringing back up all of those past traumas. So
Mhm.
I mean, ultimately, if that's something that's happening, and maybe it's something that you might want to go and see a relationship coach for, in order to kind of work through that if you want the relationship to continue. And ultimately, if you feel like it is a tactic that's just being used to undermine your self-worth, then again, that's potentially something that you might want to look at exploring individually as to whether or not you feel comfortable in that, and maybe potentially getting some support with an exit strategy. Because ultimately, what we do have to be mindful of as well is, if you feel like you're in a relationship with a person that is being abusive, should you start to try to extrapolate yourself from that, often the abuse will escalate quite dramatically. And so it's about making sure that you safeguard yourself prior to making that kind of decision as well, and knowing all your bases and your potential exit strategy. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So, yeah. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, what is the difference between a normal conflict and abuse?
Mm, absolutely. That's a beautiful question. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, a conflict is when two people's boundaries are not aligning well. Okay. So one person is wanting something and the other person is wanting something different. And so in order to come to an agreement in that, there is some give and take, right?
Mhm.
So, and that would be a healthy conflict. Ultimately, everybody has the ability and the choice to be able to try to negotiate with people to try and find the best path forward.
Mhm.
Okay. And if you're coming into a disagreement per se with that, you're both parties, generally speaking, have got the agenda of coming to a mutual agreement to find a path forward
Mhm.
with the hope, right?
Mhm.
Conversely, if you're going into a disagreement with an abusive person, their agenda isn't about looking to find an agreement, even though they will potentially agree with stuff and tell you that they're going to do this, and they won't do it. They'll undermine everything that they'll say. They're just like completely oblivious to what they've said. They can, you know, backtrack even in the conversation. They'll backtrack and say different things, potentially to give you mind salad, to confuse the other party, so that you just give up and you give in, and then you go into that fawning, people pleasing, like, this conversation is giving me brain ache, it's actually physically hurting me now, I'm just going to let you have it, so that they ultimately win. Because for an abusive person, like, power, it is inflicted by pain. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so they will give you that pain of it, like inconsistency. And so when you notice that, you feel like you've made ground with that disagreement,
Mhm.
and you're following the steps that you've chosen as a pair to move forward, but they're undermining everything that they've said and to do, and gone off and completely done everything else, then that would be an abusive uh, argument in that. And ultimately as well, quite often these people won't take any accountability in that disagreement. They'll
Mhm.
always maneuver it around to make it blame and shame on the other person.
Mhm.
So if you're finding that somehow or another, like, they're pointing at you and pointing the blame towards you, just noticing that language, rather. So ultimately, an abusive person, you'll listen to them and you'll hear that they have no accountability for their actions, or
Mhm.
they might like put on the tiger tears because they appreciate the logical empathy of it, but you can
Mhm.
tell that as soon as they've moved into the next room, that they have no kind of
Mhm.
remorse or any kind of like hanging on from that emotional state, because they don't have that emotional capacity to be able to feel that their boundaries crossing you is wrong in any way. For them, it's completely right. So
Mhm.
yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. So in
Yeah, great.
any place, it's bound to happen some kind of conflict, no?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, as human beings, and
Yeah.
and live in a society,
Uh,
it, it's conflict. When it's healthy, there can be a healthy conflict, because
healthy.
ultimately it makes both parties grow.
Mhm.
Right? When you can come together and say, this isn't quite working well, how
Mhm.
can we do this better? What
Better.
is it that we need to change with this? A conflict is a challenge to be able to move forward and grow with.
Uh-huh.
But as you say, like, if it's being used in a negative manner in order to inflict pain and to just extrapolate your source, like to take your energy, to take your finances, to take other things from you, then that would be abusive, if there's no give and take, and
Mhm.
finding that even balance where, and ultimately, like, potentially, like, if you were looking for a joint venture and looking to negotiate and maybe have
Mhm.
some kind of, if you've got a skill set and then the other person has finances, and then you would collaborate and, negotiate, and hopefully there wouldn't be conflict with it, because you've gone into the situation
Mhm.
knowing what you're both bringing to the situation, and know also potentially what your exit strategy might be going forward. But again, as you say, like, hopefully if it's a partnership relationship, like, on a more intimate basis, the longevity is the exit plan is, like, until death do us part, right? But
Mhm.
ultimately, again, as you say, in that as well, it's about appreciating that there will be lots of negotiations, and life will move you forward and give you challenges in that. And hopefully, if you can, holding space and grace for the other person's perspective, because ultimately everybody else, they can check your six for you. We can't all know
Mhm.
everything, right? And it's okay that you don't know what you don't know. You can't know what you don't know. But
Mhm.
then when you do know, you have the choice to do it better. But quite
Mhm.
often, as you say, an abusive person will be like, well, manipulating people worked well the last time. If you're not going to let me manipulate you, I will smear campaign you and erase you, and, like, and then go and try and find source from somebody else.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, some places like there are even young couples and all. There's like consistent conflict, and they
Mm.
argue and maybe like throw things at each other. But and you wonder like, what is this law? Is this abuse or conflict, or like how do they get along? But they need each other also. And but you see them arguing and all, no, and it's like you put like two cats or something, no, like these two are like like no, like and then but
I mean, yeah, I
uh,
like, as you say, I mean, like, when you think about a nervous system level, okay, quite often, if your nervous system has been brought up in a maladaptive environment where all you've seen is, say, for instance, your caregivers
mhm,
interacting in that way, that's going to be the expectation of what love looks like for you. Yeah. So we do role model the practices that we've seen around us already. And that also when our nervous systems become accustomed to that, you know, we get that thick skin to it. So like, and when our nervous system is getting high and low on that adrenaline, and then the cortisol and the stress levels, and the epinephrine as well, like the whole kind of like the up and endorphins and everything, you know. So, you know, quite often when you're getting attention, even if it is potentially an aggressive attention, it's still an attention. It's like, oh yeah, I'm getting some kind of validation and giving my point across, you know. So there is an excitement energy. You're going into your fight flight state when you're in an argument. Okay. And so when you're in that fight and flight state, it can feel quite exciting. And especially if your nervous system it's got like trauma bonded. The nervous system, it becomes addicted to these physiological hormones. Okay. And so in order to kind of come out of that, you're going to have to appreciate that it's going to feel difficult, because you're weaning your nervous system off of feeling that way, you know. And it can take up to a year for the trauma bond to break. Yeah. So like for the physiological addiction to the highs and the lows in your sympathetic nervous system, for it to start to regulate and to come into a ventral vagal state where you're actually just more harmoniously to actually heal and repair itself. And it can take a year of like no contact of like that high and low. So and it's not just in relationships where it's like throwing things and shouting, you know. You can get that kind of that fix or for that from anywhere, like shouting at a bartender in the coffee shop, say, or you know, having turbulent relationships at work as well. You know, there's always that person that's like always looking to nitpick or whatever, because they're looking for a fight, because they're looking for that adrenaline fix, you know. So, you know, appreciating when you see those kind of things, like allowing yourself to give yourself that space and grace to go, I'm going to just take a breath here before I respond, because I can feel you trying to get my nervous system into the dysregulated state that your nervous system is in. But you have autonomy over whether or not, I mean, to an extent, ultimately, you know, the fight flight state is a defense mechanism. We all physiologically have that, so as to keep us alive, right? You know, we will want to block and shield ourselves and protect our bodies to be alive. But there is an element of, you know, when it's a verbal attack, you can feel your heart beating. It's like, ah, but you don't have to take that bait, right? And giving yourself that emotional growth capacity to say, actually, I recognize that as bait, and I'm not going to give you the trigger of it bringing me into a sympathetic, or as you say, when your nervous system gets overstimulated, you don't just go back into ventral vagal. When your nervous system is overstimulated with too much cortisol, too much adrenaline, you go into a dorsal vagal state. Okay, you go into a freeze response where you will fawn and you'll just like give in, and that because your nervous system has just got too much, and it will shut you down. Because ultimately, like for instance, even like a kettle, you know, when the kettle's boiling, it's got the automatic off switch. That's what dorsal vagal is. It's that automatic off switch of like, the system's going to explode, we need to shut down. Okay, and then you'll get heavily fatigued, you'll get like that overwhelm of work, and then because now, as you say, your mind is at like 60% overload capacity, where it should be operating at about 25% capacity on a daily regulation, you know. So just allowing yourself to kind of come back into that. Like the tricks of the trade are doing some grounding, you know, legit just feeling your feet on the floor and just tensing all of your muscles in your body, just bringing your awareness back into yourself. Potentially you could do a minute worth of just mindful breathing, you know, not trying to like do anything with your breath, potentially just bringing your awareness to feeling your breath coming in and out, you know. And there's lots of other like ways that you can down regulate your system, even to the point where you just take yourself out of the scenario. Say, look, I need to go to the bathroom, excuse me, and go run cold water on your wrists, because this is a nervous soft point. So in the cold water, it helps to like down-regulate your nervous system, bring it, like
Mhm.
if you're cooling off. So that would
Oh,
be another trick that you could do. Yeah.
oh, very nice. Thank you,
Yeah.
Caroline. Yeah. So, so what about some people? They put themselves to extreme conditions, no? And for example, like yeah, modern there's always partying. That's there. Modern days there are things like this OnlyFans and things like that. So even youngsters they put themselves into very harsh conditions, maybe for the money, maybe for the fame, but and even things like pornography and all. So some people end up with things like PTSD. Uh, it's not as if they went to war, right? So
Mm.
these are like self-inflicted abuse, right? It can be because of what they are doing and things like that also. But in a way, it's like they also have a big part in this, right? It's like in a kind of like self-inflicted abuse, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, we are always looking to try to keep ourselves away from the worst pain possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, quite a lot of the things that you've just described there are distraction behavioral mechanisms. Somewhere along the line, um, they're, those those behavioral patterns are looking to try to soothe that person away from feeling some other kind of emotional pain, be it feeling like not good enough or not worthy or unlovable or not just unimportant. So those can be really, really core, powerful, painful wounds, often derived from childhood. And so
Mm-hmm.
we develop all of these different behavioral patterns that seem maladaptive and
Mm-hmm.
counterproductive in order to try to block away from feeling those core emotional wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ultimately, again, from a nervous system perspective as well, if you're always in that kind of fight, flight, sort of higher and lower, in order to kind of feel like the happiness, you'd have to start doing something more and more extreme, more and more extreme, which is often, quite often, why people then, if they turn to like cocaine and drug addiction, they that when if you was to think about your nervous system being on a baseline here, and sort of like coffee brings you up to 100, and then you have to go down to 100 because your body it looks to try to regulate it back to the baseline.
Uh-huh.
So you create hormones to bring you back down to kind of level it out. Yeah. So you get coffee a spike, and then your hormones come in and to bring you back down, and then to try and level it out. But with cocaine, it brings you up to 1,000,
Also.
right?
Uh-huh.
So then you've got to go down 1,000 before you can start coming. And the thing is, then if you're doing it again from a baseline where your start point is lower here, 1,000 is only going to bring you up halfway, and it's going to
Oh,
take you
okay,
further down.
okay.
Like, it doesn't go back unless obviously you give your body the opportunity to have a long period of time where it can self-regulate itself
Really.
to that baseline again. As I
Uh-huh.
said, like breaking the trauma bond, it takes about a year, and depending on your level of addiction, uh again, it can take a longer period of time depending on how much of a stimulant you've been regularly taking on a consistent basis. So
Mm-hmm.
just appreciating that, like, for people that haven't ever had addiction, when they've gone up and then they've come down, like, this is where they are now. Like, they're not anywhere near close to where you are on the regulation. So and often, quite often, when we're in this very deep sort of negative withdrawals of this fixes, these are when our more kind of, like, sort of like doing self-harm, or like pornography, or self like, and also like promiscuous behavior, these sort of like it, when you're looking in that, feeling that negative, you
Mm-hmm.
need to do more kind of extreme things to try to get you back up. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and just and appreciating as well, like, it's a mechanism that's trying to help and protect your nervous system to get you back onto regulation. It's
Mm-hmm.
our subconscious and all of that body that's working for us. It's doing the best it can with what it knows. Okay. And like, and look, your prefrontal cortex, ultimately, if it's offline because you're massively overstimulated,
Mm-hmm.
it is more difficult to make better decisions. because you're just offline, you're running on autopilot in these. And so it's just about giving yourself the opportunity to give yourself a little bit of calm, compassion and grace, and say, okay, maybe it's something that worked well initially, and now it's has other negative impacts, and that's okay. Life is ultimately always a choice, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully we can choose to see those behaviors with compassion, and, as you say, asking what's happened to you rather than why did you do that,
Mm-hmm.
because there's often quite a profound reason for why somebody has such extreme maladaptive coping mechanisms, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. We're all different. We've all had our journeys. you know there's no right or wrong in any of it per se. It's still your nervous system looking to try to protect you in this moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this was especially people who kind of like watch these stuff and no, you
Yeah.
were talking about no. So because
Yeah.
there was a research done in some countries, like there are new generations that are going to participate. I'm not going to explain or anything. I'm just telling. So if a person who's watching externally has to go through all this, you explained it very well, no? So the
Mm.
people who, because these are like now glorified and in on the internet and even in some podcasts and all, and they say like, oh, I earned this much, and but it's not so. Like only a very rare, really small amount does that. The
Mm.
others, it's like they are working in like some fast food outlet. So I don't know, like I have not watched this, but they from what they say, it's like quite a, even I'm not kind of putting the people who are hardworking in fast food outlets. I'm not putting them down. So I'm telling like working in one of those is much more respectable uh, than glorifying these which get a wage that is less than working in a fast food outlet. And these actresses or people who are participating in that, these are young people, very young people, and they end up with things like PTSD afterwards. Uh, so if you can just put a word in, Caroline, for even people watching, young people, without, or we see like these are glorified in some places and like, wow, she's owning, she's a millionaire, or these cars, and they try to show off on social media. And some see they have the guts, so like not even, you cannot say guts, they're like the shamelessness to say like my father supports this, he doesn't mind, and in the they say like my father is watching these, come on, right? So if you can put a word in, and even at least we can try to save the next generation who thinks like when they see this, no, oh, that is the place I should be in, no. And but it's for
Okay.
such a small time, no, and everybody even doesn't earn as such.
I mean, yeah, I do appreciate what you're saying, as you say,
Mhm.
with regards to it seems like that kind of it, employment strategy seems to be being glorified, and it does
Mhm.
come with a lot more demons than people that are pitching it will declare,
Mhm.
because, yeah, as I say, I've worked with people that have worked as escorts and things, and as
Mhm.
much as the money might be nice, there is a violation of yourself in those environments, that it depends on whether or not you're comfortable, confident, and want to be able to provide that service, and
Mhm.
and go down that route. And also often people do get trapped in that cycle as
Psycho.
well, and also as well there is other elements of abuse in that as well.
Mhm.
For instance, quite often those people will be drugged and
Mhm.
manipulated for financial gain for other people in that environment as well. And again, as you say, so I appreciate that it can
True.
have quite a negative and toxic kind of
Mhm.
environment. So but going and ultimately as well, complex trauma and PTSD, it's a succession of lots of micro traumas. So
Mhm.
a trauma every day. Doesn't doesn't matter how many times you've been violated, all of those different abuses, like put into a situation, as you said, if they're like that, and then having photographs taken when they've said no or whatever,
Mhm.
it's a micro trauma every time
Micro trauma.
you're yeah. So and then all of those traumas compounding together, your nervous system is like now having to go through, well, how do we respond to that? How do we respond to that? How do we respond to that? How do we keep ourselves safe here? And then that, as you say, it becomes debilitating because you're having to process all of those every single time you make a single decision. You know, and that's why it becomes traumatic, because trauma isn't what happened to you, it's what happens inside of you because of what happened to you. You know, and depending on how you relate and respond to those things, as you say, like, even though there's a part of you or a projection onto the social media that's saying, oh, this is great, I get this much money, there's that other element of personal shame, personal invalidation, that, you know, quite often then people in that scenario are then looking for some kind of escape to self-medicate themselves, whether it's alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever as well, to just get through the day, to try and black out the memory of it so that they can just move forward in that functional freeze state. You know, so yeah, in order to kind of address complex PTSD in that regard, you know, we simply work with the symptoms that are coming up today, and as you say, there can be many micro traumas in that. And so, like, so where I work with brain spotting in order to kind of slow down the visual cortex, the subcortex memories, and bring it into your prefrontal cortex so that you can kind of see it, so that you can process it, and then timestamp it back into your hippocampus. Okay, what happens as well with complex PTSD, because your amygdala, the fight and flight state in your brain, it grows because with hypervigilance. And so, you know, your brain is can only be so big. Your skull is this size, right? And so if you're constantly in that sort of high trauma environment, your amygdala can actually grow in order to create more and more sort of like awareness of your present state. But in the amygdala growing, what can happen is your hippocampus, which is your memory store bank, can actually shrink in size. And so when people say, oh, you know, I've got brain fog, I can't remember things, you know, not only obviously like the substance can eradicate your memory ability, but also physiologically your brain can actually shrink in size. Now, I mean, ultimately, we all have neuroplasticity, and the brain is always moving and changing and growing anyway, right? And with the things you learn. So it's not a forever, but just being mindful of the fact that people that have been through a lot of traumatic experiences, especially when they were young, might have a slightly different brain shape and size, and process things differently to other people, you know, allowing them that, rather than shaming them, oh, you don't remember, oh, I've told you this a million times, like getting frustrated with it. It's just appreciating that physiologically their brain could be very different and wired very different, and because of those traumas and that experience. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. So, if I ask the tiny question within, so how much time does it take for a person to become traumatized? From what kind of time duration? I'm just asking, like, what kind of like average time duration? Is it like within a few days, or like months, or weeks, or years?
Um. So
Just
yeah,
in
that
general, we
yeah,
cannot directly say this is this, no?
yeah. It's not a finite answer. You can't give
Sure,
that
sure.
because everybody is different. Ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you could have two people in a car crash and one person comes out like and heals from the injuries, and but the
Sure.
other person comes out, gets complex PTSD syndromes from it and has
Mm-hmm.
flashbacks and a more neurological. Again, it's about the person's pathway towards that incident, all of the other things that have happened, and about potentially the care as well that they receive from the point of impact moving forward as well. You know, whether or not they have had the sufficient time to rest and recuperate in that as well. You know, like, because when you experience a trauma, your mind goes through a cognitive dissonance. Okay, so what essentially happens is your belief about what life was
Mm-hmm.
or going to be before that incident is now completely changed. Yeah, so now you've got to future cast, now you've got to rewire everything with the new information that you've got, and it happens very quickly. But again, it depends on what it is as to how quickly and how well supported it has been, as for how quickly your brain can kind of remesh itself together after cognitive dissonance. okay,
Mhm.
because it's like pruning of everything that you thought you knew, and it's
Mhm.
actually very painful. Like when you kind of like you're thinking your thought and then suddenly it sort of drops off and you're just like like it can be
Mhm.
feeling. So your nervous system will also kind of like shut you down to try and, when you go through grief, yeah, you get those bouts of sadness, and it's basically your body trying to slow you down physiologically and engaging socially, so that it has the space and capacity to be able to heal
Mhm.
those non-visible bruises within your brain and within your emotional capacity. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so often it's an instantaneous thing,
Oh, really?
it like
Uh-huh.
trauma is like, yeah, I mean, it
Mm.
depends on what's obviously happening.
Mhm.
Yeah. But trauma essentially is too much too quick too soon.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you're in a car crash and it's like bang straight away, too much too quick too soon, your nervous system will put you into that shock mode to try to help you through it. And
Mm.
but ultimately, if you're in an abusive situation, it'll be too much. It'll be like the car crash, and then the next car crash, and then the next, and it's like a 10 motorway car pile up, and like you're just like, I can't get out of this because it's just never ending. You don't get the opportunity to heal
Yeah.
before the next event. It's that complete that compounding effect. Yeah.
Mhm. Mm. Okay, so we come to our last question. So this is kind of like a very sensitive topic, and okay, we talked about many types of traumas. No, you explained very well about many. So some people say this, some people are like really humane and all. So for example, somebody who went through trauma, like because of their reasons or another reason, some people point blank say like, no, I cannot, I'm not a psychologist, no, I'm not a therapist, and I cannot handle this person's baggage, no, male, female, anything, no, I'm telling you. So some people point blank say, I just met this person, no, so I'm not, I don't want to carry this load, right? But there are some people who say no, like I met another wonderful person also, and her husband is a very good person. She had gone through a lot of things in life, and he stood by, and now they are living beautifully. So there are some people like that. So uh, how can we find this, like what is the line, is there a line, or like because we cannot say like you have to be there, no, for a person,
Mm.
and those people, so how can we figure this out? Or like if you find, I'm just asking in general, eh? So because these people need help, right? The people who went through trauma, if they have all the help, uh, so but sometimes they've self-inflicted, like we were talking, or they were in that situation for some reason, or they put themselves there. So then a person who's coming next, it's like many questions together, but should they or should not? And then, but I believe like it's a very genuine and no, like a divine thing if they can stay and like help. So, what would be your ideology in these both aspects? It means like, should they be there, or is it like their responsibility, or uh, and the other sense, it will be beautiful if somebody stood there and helping another human being, no? So, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
asking in general, eh?
Amazing. Yeah, brilliant, brilliant, beautiful question. I mean, ultimately, we all have a duty of care to ourselves to be able to protect our own boundaries. So
Mhm.
again, as you say, if there is somebody that's saying what you need is more than I have to be able to offer to help and support you,
Mm.
that's completely okay for that person to hold that boundary and say, I don't have the skill set or the capacity to be able to help you with what you've got.
Mm.
I could potentially signpost you to someone else that has. But all of us have our own duty of care to look and heal and heal ourselves, because nobody else can actually heal us. The
Uh-huh.
only person that can heal ourselves is ourselves. Okay.
Mhm.
Like we're the only one in this head of ours, right? Nobody
Mhm.
else is in here. Okay.
Mhm.
So we're the only one that knows what it feels like to be us
Mhm.
ourselves. So we're the only ones that really can heal ourselves. Again, like if you go to the doctor, all they do is actually, like if you go to the doctor with a broken leg, all they do is put a cast around it and tell you to wait while
Mhm.
your body heals itself.
Yes.
Okay. So looking for another person to heal somebody
Uh,
is apart from giving them the opportunity to like potentially service some needs, like giving them support with like bringing food or whatever if they're not able to
mhm.
do that, or taking them to appointments if they're not able to drive or whatever, and giving them that facilitation support. Other than that, the journey is the own individuals. They need to do their own inner self work. It's not no, and nobody can force that on anybody. As much as you might have your opinion on it, the only person that can do the journey is themselves. And so by giving yourself the opportunity to just hold space and grace and compassion, and holding that boundary in there, and that's okay. That's enough for each of us. So, and like, again, if it gets to a point where that person is so maladaptive that they're inflicting pain on you, that's when you have to make a decision about whether or not you can keep them in your environment, because your own health and well-being is paramount. You can't help somebody if you're unwell yourself. So yeah. So I would say, know your limitations. If you don't have the ability to help, that's okay. Know your expectations as well, because a lot of people don't voice what they expect from somebody else and then get upset when they don't receive it. So there's that element of communication, and being brave with using your voice as well, because as you say, societally we can get indoctrinated with saying yes when we mean no and stuff like that. So, or like, oh, I'll have to do what's expected of me even though it's wearing me out and I haven't really got the capacity for it. So giving yourself the space and grace to heal, and give yourself some time to rest and recuperate more, like without looking at the phone before bed and stuff like that, because I know that we all know we've done it, and we all know how wrecked we felt the next day. So yeah, and just just giving, I mean, all that you can do is give a person the opportunity to see that there is potential help out there, but you can't make them take it, and being okay with that as well. Yeah.
And the toughest part is if you, how to say, like if you are willing to stay, then you'll have to witness something. For example, like their trigger points or something, or they can throw those things at you also. No, it can happen. So you will have to endure that part also if you are willing, or like you say, hey, I stick by you. No, so there will be times that these things will be coming on to you also. So we have to be prepared for that also. No, if you are trying to be with somebody who went through a lot, and there'll be things that occur, no, triggers or coming, past things so coming up, brewing, no, and coming, and it might come towards you also. So it can happen, right?
Absolutely, as you say, any person that's worked in care appreciates that, like, quite often that trauma will be flung towards them, even though it's not meant for them. And that's
Yeah, no.
okay. Like, when someone's massively dysregulated like that, we're all kind of a part of that per se. But again, it's about knowing your emotional capacity, having space within your life externally from that relationship where you do your own self-care, and find your own places to, like, vent all of those negative sensations and emotions within your body, so that you can, like, come back to it with a calm compassion, rather than being pressed up against the glass of, oh my gosh, it's going to get my trigger and we just explode, right? Again, we're going back to that nervous system element where we were talking about when someone's dysregulated and you've come in a regulated state and you're looking to be able to support them, being mindful of, you need to really tend to that regulated state within yourself to be able to help that dysregulated person come into a regulated state. Okay, because we do feed off of each other's energies. Yeah. So, and just knowing your own triggers, knowing your own journey, so that you know where and what might potentially be a point where I need to take a break, and giving yourself the opportunity and the grace to say, I need a break here, and that's okay. And not holding a shame upon yourself to say, I needed to have a break there, I needed some other support with that, and that's okay. And because I think a lot of us think that, we're independent, we've got to do this on our own, and it's not enough. It's not you're allowed to get help.
Yeah.
Giving yourself permission to get help quite often is a big barrier for people. Even giving yourself permission to feel things that are not comfortable can be a big barrier. Like, that's where we do with brain spotting. It's about noticing what you notice, and there's no right or wrong in it, and just giving yourself permission to let your body express it. because it's okay that a part of you hates that. It's okay that a part of you loves that. It's okay that a part of you resents that. It's okay that a part of you is jealous of that. It's okay that a part of you is strengthened and empowered by that.
Mhm.
You're a 360-degree person. You're allowed to have a variety of
Mhm.
reactions, responses, and emotions towards it.
Mhm.
And then ultimately giving yourself grace and space and capacity in knowing that about yourself and how you feel about that yourself, then you can downregulate your system, and then you can help move forward with your path,
Mhm.
and also appreciating that not everyone's going to want to choose the same road as you, and that's
Mhm.
okay as well. That other
Mhm.
person might be very happy choosing a very different, like, value. We all have
Mhm.
very different values. My value is honesty. Another
Mhm.
person's value might be hard work. Another person's value might be,
Mhm.
you know, community. And we're all very different, and
Sure.
that's okay.
Uh-huh. I know I asked the question like how long does it take to get a trauma? So I just
Mm.
to finish off the questions, I'll just ask one more. So how long does it take to recover from a trauma or abuse? Sorry, that abusive trauma situation. If you come out of the situation and or escape that, how much time? I know that you can go for specifics. So in a way, I'm trying to show asking you because like try people will see like if it takes such a long time to get yourself free from that, why would I stay there? Or like if it takes no to recover even. So
Um,
generally, how would you mention like
right. So again, this is another one of those impossible questions,
sure, sure,
because
sure, I get
ultimately
you. I get you. Yeah.
everybody's situation is completely different.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All I can say about is with regards to um, the tangible physical environment of being in a position where for my story,
Mm-hmm.
for where I was in the position where I had the abusive person in
Mm-hmm.
my life, I got police support, and then they got arrested and were on a bail condition. So essentially, like, taking the perpetrator out of my life was quite a quick
Okay.
situation,
Okay.
So, and then once you've got the perpetrator out of your life, to an extent, obviously, there's other stuff that happens, like going through court and like the
Mm-hmm.
police and like other sort of heavy things to have to work through in that.
Sure.
So my nervous system was massively shut down. I was in freeze, just trying to function through that rather than starting my healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
I had to handle what was tangibly on the plate right now. So didn't have the capacity at the time to start healing my emotional journey. So from the incident where they were then arrested, and then I would say probably about 4 months after that, for my own nervous system, I began to start really going through the grief process and the anger of that, which then obviously had different ramifications
Mm-hmm.
in that support. Although I still had the other party out of my life, because by then I had a non-molestation order in place. Um, and then probably about 3 months after that, so sort of about 10 months after that, that was when I personally found the information to be able to start understanding what was going on subconsciously and physiologically with me, like
Mm-hmm.
understanding the nervous system, because I was looking to try to heal. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't know where to look. And that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, as you say, then sort of going through the work and getting my own coaching, and actually having brain spotting, probably April 2023, was really massively viscerally releasive and expressive for my own nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
because I'd been suppressing a lot and I'd lost a lot of self-trust because of the nature of the incidents as well. Um, so that was a big shifting power movement for
Mm-hmm.
me. Then obviously I was going through the court and divorce, and like learning that and winning that. So that was a good empowerment move, so that I could move forward with my future from that and
Mm-hmm.
properly extrapolate, like, um through the divorce courts, like my actual physical ties with that other person as well. Um, and then, and so then it's been another journey, and then I had some other things come up, and then obviously I went to the homeless shelter and was like in that environment where I was with a lot of people that were, as you say, extracted from domestic abuse and violence, more kind of time step, like more quickly than I had been, because my journey had kind of gone a different way. I just found myself homeless because of the nature of divorce and having to sell
Sure.
the family home.
Uh-huh.
Um, rather than coming directly from an incident. So I'd had a bit more of a period of time. And then again, she says but it's always an ongoing journey. And I've had like other counseling and stuff like that, you know. So our nervous systems, once we've developed a behavioral pattern, it's not completely gonna ever go away. Like, you've developed that now, you know, it's a part, it's a resource should you ever need it again, right? But again, like, it's about giving ourselves the opportunity to kind of go in and go, are you working for the benefit of me right now, or are you working for the benefit of me when I was in that abusive situation? And then sort of like highlighting that behavioral pattern, that it's reacting to then, but it's not adapted now, and just working physiologically with that, and appreciating as well that, like, cognitively, we're the imagination, we're the blueprint makers. We, you know, if you was to make a house, like blueprint a house, like, I'm going to build this brand new life for myself, here's the blueprint, this is what I want. So you need to obviously do some work with regards to future casting what you want your new self identity to be like post abuse. Okay, so that's a big area of like working in positive psychology, like your health, your relationships, your finances, and all of the other areas that you need to address, to look at what holistically would be better for you moving, and that gives you a blueprint. And then also appreciating, again, like if you were building a house, right, now your body, it might have the blueprint, but it works a lot slower. You've got to allow it to build those foundations, and to dig down into those foundations to kind of get out all of the roots and all of the bits underneath the foundation that's not going to service to support a good structure moving forward. And then build in all of the utilities, what you need, your self-care structures and stuff like that, and then building up again on like your first floor and your second floor, and then learning the roof, like the financial concepts and like how to keep you safe. Like, so like when you give yourself the time scale, like easily say at least 3 years, like we've already addressed that your physiological addiction to the trauma bond is going to take at least a year. Okay. And then you've got to allow yourself the opportunity to build new connections, to build new self-resiliencies, to create new habits, and to become that, and also to try it out and then go, actually, I'm not sure that feels quite right, let me try and change. And ultimately life is always a journey towards growing, changing, and moving forward, and getting new challenges and experiencing new things and bringing new information in, and hopefully, you know, creating new connections that expand your mind and your possibilities even further, because ultimately, you know, we just want to be able to grow and create, right? So for me, that's what life is all about: grow, create, and connect. Like, you know, so it's not per se a forever journey, a destination, but like it depends on what you feel like healing would look like for you, and then work towards that, and give yourself a reasonable time frame, because it's not going to be like that. Because what is that apart from like a car crash accident, you know? But that's like negative things, like to change your directory. But I mean, even if you was to think about a car crash, like how long does that take to extrapolate all of that, you know, to come back from, you know, 6 weeks to heal a broken bone, and how long does it take to fix the cars and or make new ones, and you know, like, it's so everything has its own timeline, and you can't per se say this is going to take that long. And giving yourself the opportunity to say, that's okay. That's okay. You know, sometimes it's my mentor Caroline Strawson says, you know, sometimes it's a new level, new devil. You know, when you feel like you've unlocked a block with that, and it expands you out into the opportunity of finding something else to work on, you know, and just giving yourself the opportunity to look at self-healing, and with a with an openness and a grace and a curiosity and a playfulness as well, you know, like trying to find some fun and joy in just the little moments when you realize, oh, I didn't overreact to that, and that's so amazing. Just seeing those little spaces where you behaved in a way that you wanted to behave better than you have done in the past, and that's okay, you know. Giving yourself those little reward challenges, like, yeah. And also feeding into your life rewards, giving yourself the opportunity to say, I want to do this for me, and that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, what should we do? Like, shall you wrap it up now, or like, would you like to say how you help this client? was going through that difficult.
I think I think that Sanjivana, it would be really, really awesome if we
Uh-huh.
leave everyone on hooks, because again, as you say, we don't want to give people like mental fatigue, because we've discussed quite a
Sure,
lot
sure.
here. And
Yeah,
again,
no, I
that
get you.
with that caveat of
Uh-huh.
saying, should any of this stuff have brought up like stuff within
Mm-hmm.
you,
Yeah,
reach
yeah.
out to your local support areas. Yeah.
I
And
also felt like you finished it in a very nice note, and like it came very nicely.
yeah,
So yeah, so maybe this is good, no? Like yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much
Thank you
again for
so
giving.
much, Caroline, and it's a great pleasure as always. And the expertise and all you share is so valuable, and definitely the people will have good use of this, and even to be aware that about they are going through some kind of similar situations.
Yeah,
And it's really appreciated. Thank you so
yeah,
much, and have a wonderful rest of the day. And for everybody, I will put all Caroline's details and all. You can contact her and in the post as well as through the post as well as the video. And these are beautiful gemstones in the society, and people can get lot of help from the people, valuable people like Caroline. Thank you so
yeah,
much,
brilliant.
Caroline. Have a
Thank you.
beautiful day.
Thank
Yeah?
you.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
you too. And
much.
as you say, like in the links, I know that you're going to be dropping in that strengths test from
Mhm.
my mentor Caroline Strawson. Yeah, so if people want to get curious about where their strengths lie, and so that would be really awesome for them to just have a go with that. So as you say, it's
Uh-huh.
free. It's a free strengths test. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
get
Uh-huh.
curious about you, because you are an amazing creature and you're
Mhm.
beautiful, and we're very happy that you're here
Please
with us.
tell a little bit about the strength test.
Yeah, so the strengths test is about 96 questions. It's just like on a grid of
Uh-huh.
like yes, no,
Okay,
sometimes.
okay,
So
okay.
it's very self-explanatory. Some
Mhm.
of the questions might feel a little bit like they repeat themselves, but they are nuanced in trying to track in where your different value levels are. If you've, as you
Mhm.
said, we spoke about values today and strengths and things.
Sure.
And so sometimes it can be a bit difficult to kind of even know that of yourself. It's
Mhm.
easy to see it in other people, but it's difficult sometimes to look and reflect on our own selves. So
Mhm.
it's one of those little tests that just gives you a little window into who you are a little bit potentially more. So yeah,
Mhm.
and
Okay,
and
okay.
it goes in for some research as well. So it's just,
Uh-huh.
helps everybody.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
Have a good
much. Have a great day, Caroline. Yeah? Thank you,
thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
See you soon.
See you later.
Okay. Thank you.